Welcome to the International Social Sessions, a series where we're digging into some of the hottest and most important topics in international social media with some of the speakers who'll be taking the stage at the International Social Summit in Barcelona in May. We'll be finding out about them and what drives them in their social career, as well as diving into a specific social topic to get their insights and expertise, and hopefully leaving you with some great takeaways whether you're attending the event or not. I'm Gemma Houghton, Director of Marketing at Webcertain, the international agency behind the event. And today my guest is Daiana Damacus, who's the Head of Audience Marketing at Webcertain, which obviously includes social media. And she will be speaking at the summit in May alongside one of our designers about the topic of visuals in social media. So thank you for being here today, Daiana.
Thank you for having me.
So before we get into the specifics of the topic, I wanted to ask you a bit about you. And the first question I've got really is, why social media? What is it that you most love about working in social media? And what drives you every day to get up and do your job?
So, why social media? The way I came kind of across the social media career is, I think, a way many people come across, but it's I don't come from a traditional marketing background. So I started in journalism. And nowadays with journalism, there's a lot of work that you have to do on social media. So you can find stories from social media, and Twitter, now called X, used to be a great source for stories. You can find people that you interview on social media. You can promote your articles and share them on social media. So there was just a lot of social media work involved. And I think especially when you're at the start of your career in journalism, that's one of the things that you do very often. And I also had done a bit of PR, which also involved a lot of social media. So honestly, when I first applied for a social media job, I didn't think I'd get it. It was one of those things where I was like, well, I think I know how this is done. I'll give it a go and see what happens. And I remember thinking I need to write a very good cover letter because my CV doesn't have anything relevant. So I need to kind of show what I can do with social media in my cover letter. And years later, my first manager told me that it was the best cover letter they had ever received. So clearly, I had it. I wrote really good things in that cover letter. But that's how I came across social media, and it's really the reason why I thought it would fit me is because social media is a very creative medium. I think out of all the marketing methods, let's say, social media is the most creative, is the one where people share their ideas, their thoughts. And I think that's why it was a good fit, because I'm a very creative person. And that's also the reason why I like working in social media, because there's so much things that you can do with it. There's new things that come to the platforms every single time. There's more than one platform. There's new platforms getting introduced every time that have different features, and you can play around with it so much. And I think for me particularly, I've managed to grow my team from just doing social media into doing content marketing, influencer marketing, research, and all of those things tie in with social media. So I think it is like the gift that keeps on giving, because so many things are happening across social media that every week I'm watching news about the platforms and I think, there's something new that I can do. And I think that is what makes it really exciting for me to work in this field.
Yeah, that's great. And I think that's probably very true for so many people. I also think now, if you're applying for your first job in social media, a cover letter would not work. You would need to be, showing a TikTok reel or, some kind of really cool Instagram collection. It's definitely changed over that time. That's something that I think, yeah, it's a whole different world than it was a few years ago.
Yeah.
So, at the Social Summit, as I mentioned, you're going to be speaking about the topic of visuals in social media. So, out of all the potential hundreds of topics you could have picked, why is that the one that you really wanted to speak about?
I've thought of this topic for a couple of years now, and there's so many conferences where I thought I could maybe sneak it in. But this is obviously a great fit because visuals and social media go together. Um, Visuals are something that most companies struggle with. And I've seen this again and again with clients. We have so many clients that really, when we start talking to them about images or videos, that's a bottleneck. It's a bottleneck for budget. It's a bottleneck for starting campaigns. And I think social media managers will be very familiar with visuals and how they need to create them, but other people in companies not so much. And so visuals are something that are often left as, if you've got a bit of budget, we'll do some visuals. If not, we'll just go with whatever. And I don't think that's a good way of going about it. And this is why I want to talk about it and give people some tips on how to create good visuals, even if you maybe don't have a lot of budget or you don't have your stakeholders in with the idea of creating visuals.
And what are the biggest mistakes that you see? You mentioned you see this again and again, and I think it's fairly common that this is the case. What are the biggest mistakes you see that brands are making when it comes to how they use visuals within their social, and yeah, why is it? Is it really just down to resources and availability of time and money to actually really create anything?
I'm sure there's loads of factors involved. I think one of the biggest mistakes is just kind of going with some boring stock image that doesn't really say anything about your brand. And I do think loads of companies will do that because they don't have the budgets to hire photographers, organize photo shoots, all of that jazz. They probably don't have the internal resources either. So even having like a graphic designer to make something from a stock library look customized might take budget that they don't have. But I've seen so many companies that just put on really gray. It's like a combination of gray, beige, black and white images that go on the feeds, and it's about a product. It doesn't have any human element in it, and it just doesn't say anything to social media users at the end of the day. Because I think having images for social media and having images for your website can be very different things. And the images on the website, there's certain pages on your website where they can be a bit more boring, where it's actually good to just have a straightforward image of maybe what you're selling. But on social media, they should not be like that. And yet we see them a lot from across the board from different companies.
Yeah, and we all know that ourselves, don't we? We all scroll social media probably more than we should, and it is those images and videos are what does catch your attention, because there is so much there. There is a lot there. Nobody's really reading every word on the page, so the images and the visuals, something striking, is what is potentially going to make somebody stop and read the post or click on the post. So they are pretty essential, really, to success. And do you think that then is a key reason why maybe some businesses don't see the results from social that they would expect to, and that they're struggling to really build up that momentum, build up engagement on the platforms?
Yeah, I think images play some parts. I do also think that it's because a lot of companies talk mostly about themselves on social media, and if you're an individual on social media, then that's fine. You can just talk about yourself. I feel like that's more or less what social media is for individuals. But if you're a company, you should actually be talking about what your audience wants to hear and what their pain points are and how you can help them become more efficient, or whatever, whatever your products or services are offering. And yeah, if you don't have images that speak to them, if you only have images that speak to you as a company, they're not going to stop, because they're not going to stop on your content, because they won't think it's relevant to them. And even if you're offering a product or a service that they need, if they don't feel like they could be in a good relationship with you, and like they don't feel like they're understood and you're not on the same page, they might not go with you, even if you're offering them a good deal. I think people need to be uh, need to feel like they're understood and they're in a relatable relationship with their providers, with the companies that they're in. Brand loyalty is so big nowadays. I mean, Apple is a prime example of probably a brand that has the most loyal customers in the world. So you really do need to make those images about your audience and not yourself.
And what's your starting point then as a team, and if you're working with a client, in terms of deciding the kind of visuals and brainstorming, kind of getting that creative process going? Because that can be the most challenging part, really, is, okay, we need something that's going to catch attention and that's a bit different. But then if that's not what your business does, if you are selling something that's quite boring and the images on your website are quite plain and monotone, what's the process to kind of come up with something that matches your brand but is a bit more interesting for social?
So one of the first things I say is do your research, go out there and do a bit of social listening and see the kind of images that people react to. So you can have a look at user-generated content, you can have a look at your competitors, see what engagements they receive for what kind of images. It's like doing a complete visual audit almost on the content that is out there, just focusing on that. And then if you do have boring products, and we work with a lot of brands that don't have the most appealing products. I mean, they are machinery and, something that's just by
Yeah.
itself. It's a piece of metal. And there's only so much that you can do with it. You can't actually, I don't know, put it next to a bunch of flowers, because that will make no sense. Then I'd say focus your social media visuals on your people, on your teams. If you do have a chance to go and take some pictures of your teams actually working with this machinery, or the products that you have, do that. You can make videos with your customers. And there are also brands who make videos with their customers, showing the end results, so showing the products that their customers are creating by using their machinery. And that is it offers a bit more dynamics. It's a bit more interesting than just seeing a machine work, because you're also seeing the end result, you're seeing the whole process. And it also has humans, because you've got your customers talking about your products. So definitely get people involved.
And I think something that's also important to remember for social content is that it doesn't necessarily have to be a super polished, special effects, really well shot video. Using a phone, doing something a bit more kind of casual is appropriate for social. It might not be what you want to put on as your hero video on your main website page, but if it's just showing somebody using it, nobody's going to be looking at as long as it's of relative quality. Nobody's bothered that it's not shot with 45 cameras and lights. It's more what's being said and what's being shown that's important.
Yeah, I totally agree. TikTok is a prime example of that. And TikTok is not the best fit for all companies by any means. But what TikTok has created, the short videos, has now then expanded to YouTube and to Instagram, and they're all getting inspired by each other. And I think there is a place for those kind of videos on YouTube, for example, even for manufacturing companies. We just have a short that is showing people how a product works, or how your team works together. And it doesn't have to be, like you said, polished. In fact, those things, the less polished they are, the better, because you don't want to make it seem like you've staged your employees and you've given them a script and you've told them where to stand and how to move. The more organic, the better, for sure.
Great. And obviously, this is the International Social Summit, and we are an agency working very much on international campaigns. So we have to touch on this element, which is, what additional challenges and considerations do you need to bear in mind when you are running social campaigns across multiple countries and languages? And, how does that impact the visual creation process and how you select what kind of visuals to use?
So the obvious thing is make sure that you have the right people in the photos. And we have actually seen global brands who have had not the how to say it, not the right mix of people for countries in Africa or for countries in Asia. And that might seem obvious, like make sure that the people showing in your photos are the people living in those countries, or at least ideally have diversity in your photos, have a mix. But sometimes that is lost as well. So obviously that's the first thing. But then something else is there are certain colors that have certain meanings in certain countries. So you might want to have a look and do a bit of research to find out what are the colors that people react to the best, if there's any special meanings behind colors. Maybe there are some colors that you want to avoid in some countries. For example, red is a color that can be a bit troubling in Japan, if I remember correctly, because I think it's associated with fire, which is not the kind of passion fire, but the house destroying fire. And there have been some brands that have struggled to sell their products because people don't want to buy a box that's all red, for example. So all sort of things like that need to be taken into consideration. Also, look at what people do, what your audience does, I would say, in their free time, their hobbies, because they will differ from country to country. Because even if that's not directly related to the product that you're selling or the service that you're selling, by having images that show people doing what your audience likes to do, you're immediately telling them, we know who you are, we like who you are, we understand you, and that's why you should work with us.
Yeah, they're all really important tips. And like you say, sometimes it can seem obvious, but it can be quite easy to miss those things and to, just get carried away with the idea and forget about some of the details. And it's the detail that is what makes the big difference, and it can really make you stand out.
Yeah. Especially, I think, if you have a campaign that's worked really well in another country. And then you might think, oh, we'll use the same thing, and just don't stop to think about the details. And again, I do think this is often because of time, because of budget, not necessarily because people sit there and think, oh yeah, this will do. But it's often just a result of I think, rushing things.
Yeah, we're all guilty of that, definitely, at some time or other. So if you could share just one final tip, or your really, your top tip when it comes to creating visuals for social, what would it be? What's the most important thing you'd want people to take away?
Make them colorful, whether it's a video or an image. Have some color in that, even if it's just a pop of color. There are so many images that don't stand out from the feeds. Most of the feeds are white grayish, or like a dark gray if you can set them up in like a dark mode. So make sure that there's a pop of color, because often when people scroll, it's the image that makes them stop first. But if your image gets just lost in the background, they will just keep scrolling. So have color. That's my first tip. If you do anything with your images, make them colorful.
It's a good one. It's a good one. So finally, just as we wrap up, um, I have to ask you why you are looking forward to speaking at the International Search Summit. No. And finally, to wrap up, I have to ask you why you're looking forward to speaking at the International Social Summit and why anybody watching this here should be going to buy a ticket.
Well, I don't want to say I'm biased, but I think for us, having an international social summit has been such a dream come true, because we've known for a while that there's a lot of international social media marketers out there who struggle to find peers and struggle to find a place where people have where they can find people who have the same issues as them. And I've attended before in the past plenty of social media conferences and couldn't really find anyone that I could relate to necessarily, because all the people there were in country marketers, or they were just focused on the US or English speaking markets. And this conference is bringing people from all over the world, and we're talking about platforms from all over the world, different topics, from paid to organic to visuals to employee advocacy, what have you, content, all of that. And last year when I was attending, it was just such a nice feeling to meet people and be like, oh, I struggle with this with my international client, and they'd go, oh, we struggle with this as well, and just kind of bond over your mutual struggles, and you get advice not just from the speakers but also from the attendees themselves, who will most likely be in the same field as you and struggling with the same things. And I just love speaking about social media. So like that's my main reason for looking forward to speaking about it. But I also think the audience is great. And you do get fun questions, and it's a bit of like more of a chill atmosphere. Like it's not super serious where you feel like, oh my God, what are they going to ask me? Because you are surrounded by your peers and they will kind of recognize your answers and, you know, relate to you. So yeah, it's a great event, and I'm not saying it because I'm biased. I genuinely felt properly understood by the audience and the attendees last year more than I have at other conferences that I've attended. So buy your tickets now.
Well, that is definitely a good endorsement, and I hope, an accurate reflection of what we're trying to achieve with it and what I hope, we do achieve. So we hope that, we'll see many of you there. And thank you so much, Daiana, for sharing your insights today. Really looking forward to having you speak in May.
I look forward to it too.
Thank you for watching, and hopefully see you there in May.